Just one coffee, please?" His eyes met hers, rain plastering gray hair to his skull. Sarah clutched her last $3. Rent was due Friday, utilities loomed, but his gaze held something lost, familiar almost. Could she really walk away? Sarah swallowed hard, the smell of stale grease and burnt coffee suddenly acrid in her nostrils. The man huddled in the doorway of Rosie's diner wasn't new. He'd been a fixture for weeks now, maybe longer, usually quiet, keeping to himself on the edge of the entryway, seeking meager shelter from the biting Chicago wind or, like tonight, the relentless, drenching rain. He never panhandled aggressively, never caused trouble, just sat, watching the city rush by, with eyes that seemed ancient, filled with a weariness that went bone deep. Most people ignored him, stepped around him like he was just another piece of urban debris. Sarah usually offered a polite nod, sometimes a quick, pitying smile she immediately regretted. Tonight felt different. The rain was colder, fiercer. The diner was nearly empty. The usual late-night rush dwindled to a couple arguing quietly in a corner booth, and old Mr. Henderson nursing a lukewarm decaf at the counter. Sarah's shift was almost over. 12 hours on her feet. Her legs ached. Her head throbbed. All she wanted was to go home to her tiny studio apartment, soak her feet, and maybe eat the half sandwich she'd saved from her break. Those $3 crumpled in her apron pocket were literally all she had until payday. Enough for bus fare home and maybe, just maybe, a packet of instant noodles tomorrow. Giving it away meant walking home in this downpour. It meant definitely skipping breakfast. But the man's eyes. There was an intelligence there, buried under layers of grime and exhaustion. A flicker of something sharp, observant. Not vacant like so many others she saw living rough on the streets. He looked at her, not just through her. Why did this stranger feel familiar? Was it just pity playing tricks on her tired mind? "Okay," she sighed, the word barely audible above the drumming rain. She smoothed the crumpled bills. "One coffee, coming right up." She turned back towards the counter, ignoring the slight shake in her hands. Stupid. So stupid. Helping felt good for a second, sure, but the walk home was going to be miserable. Rosie, the diner's owner, wiping down the gleaming chrome espresso machine, caught her eye and raised a questioning eyebrow. Sarah just shook her head slightly, pouring hot, strong coffee into a thick ceramic mug. Not a paper cup. A real mug. If he was going to have coffee, let it be a decent one. Something warm to hold on to for a while. She added 2 sugars and a splash of milk, just how she liked hers. Guessing he might too, she carried the steaming mug carefully back to the doorway. The man looked up, surprise flickering in those deep-set eyes. He accepted the mug with hands that were rough, calloused, but surprisingly steady. His fingers were long, elegant almost, despite the dirt ingrained under his nails. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice raspy from disuse but clear, educated even. Not the slurred tones she often heard. He took a slow sip, closing his eyes briefly as the warmth hit him. "Thank you, Sarah." Sarah froze. Her breath caught in her throat. How did he know her name? Her name tag was pinned to her apron, yes, but he said it with such familiarity, like he'd known her forever. She stared at him, really looked at him this time. Beneath the grime, the tangled gray hair, the ill-fitting soaked coat. The bone structure of his face was strong. Defined cheekbones. A firm jawline, now softened by neglect but still visible. There was an air of distinction about him, incongruous with his current state. How do you know my name?" she stammered, pulling her thin jacket tighter around herself, suddenly feeling cold despite the diner's warmth. The man took another slow sip of coffee, his eyes meeting hers over the rim of the mug. The gaze was intense now, searching. "Your father used to call you sorry, didn't he? Especially when you brought him coffee just like this." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. Sorry. No one had called her sorry in 15 years. Not since her father died. Not since everything fell apart. Her father, Michael Bellwood, a proud man, an ambitious architect whose dreams had crumbled into bankruptcy and despair before a sudden, fatal heart attack stole him from her life when she was just 18. It was a private nickname, a loving, diminutive he'd used since she was a little girl toddling around his drafting table, bringing him imaginary coffee in her toy teacup. How could this homeless man possibly know that name? Panic fluttered in her chest, cold and sharp. Who was he? Was this some cruel joke? Some kind of scam? "Who are you?" she whispered, backing away slightly towards the diner's interior. The man set the mug down carefully on the floor beside him. He seemed to gather himself, straightening his shoulders slightly. The movement pulled the ragged coat tighter, revealing the faint outline of something solid beneath it. Not a weapon, it seemed, but perhaps a book? Or a folder? "My name is Arthur Pendleton," he said, his voice gaining strength, losing some of its rasp. "And I knew your father, Sarah. Very well. He was my best friend. My business partner. Arthur Pendleton." The name echoed faintly in Sarah's memory, a ghost from a past she rarely revisited. Pendleton and Bellwood Architects. It had been on her father's letterhead, on the sign outside the gleaming downtown office they'd lost. Pendleton. The partner her father had sometimes argued with behind closed doors. The partner who, according to the sparse, bitter accounts her distraught mother had offered before her own premature death years later, had allegedly embezzled funds, run the company into the ground, and disappeared, leaving her father to face the ruin alone. This man? This broken figure, huddled in the rain? He was Arthur Pendleton? It seemed impossible. Laughable. Yet, the nickname. The specific detail about the coffee. Only someone incredibly close to her father could have known that. "You?" Sarah breathed, disbelief warring with a rising tide of old anger, inherited grief. "You ruined him. You destroyed our family." Arthur's face tightened, pain flashing in his eyes. A pain that looked far deeper than mere physical hardship. "No, Sarah. That's the story you were told. The story everyone was meant to believe. But it wasn't the truth." He reached inside his coat, his movements slow, deliberate, not threatening. He pulled out a worn, leather-bound folder protected from the rain by layers of plastic sheeting. It looked ancient, battered by time and circumstance, yet treated with obvious care. "Your father," Arthur continued, his voice thick with emotion, "was betrayed, so was I, by our junior partner, Richard Vale. He manipulated the books, diverted funds offshore, framed me for the initial shortfalls, and then vanished after setting up the final collapse. By the time your father and I realized the full extent of the fraud, Vale was gone, the company was beyond saving, and the evidence pointed squarely at me." Sarah stared at him, speechless. Richard Vale. Another name from the past. A slick, ambitious young man her father had taken under his wing. He'd vanished around the time of the bankruptcy. Everyone assumed he'd just found another job, landed, on his feet like ambitious young men often did. Could it be true? Could the narrative that shaped her entire adult life, her father the victim, Pendleton the villain, be wrong? "Why? Why didn't you fight it?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. "Why disappear? Why let everyone believe you were guilty?" Arthur looked down at the folder in his hands. "Vale was ruthless. He made threats. Not just against me, Sarah. Against you. He knew your father doted on you. He made it clear that if I went to the authorities, if I tried to expose him before he could disappear completely, he would ensure something unfortunate happened to you. Your father begged me to run, to disappear, to let Vale think he'd won. Michael's priority was keeping you safe. He made me promise I would stay hidden until Vale was no longer a threat. And then I would find you, tell you the truth, and fulfill one last promise I made to him. He opened the folder carefully. Inside were yellowed documents, old partnership agreements, bank statements highlighted with frantic handwritten notes, Sarah, recognized as her father's distinctive scrawl, and photographs. One showed two young men, beaming, standing proudly under the new Pendleton and Bellwood sign. Her father, vibrant and full of hope, beside a younger, sharper version of the man, before her. Another photo showed Arthur holding her, a toddler Sarah on his shoulders, both laughing. The final item he pulled out was a sealed envelope, addressed simply to Sari, her father's handwriting. Arthur held it out to her. He wrote this for you just before he died. He suspected his heart was giving out. He gave it to me the last time I saw him, made me swear I'd deliver it myself when the time was right, when I could prove my innocence and ensure Vale couldn't hurt you. Vale died in a boating accident in South America 5 years ago. It took me this long to track you down safely, Sarah, to be sure the danger had truly passed. Sarah took the envelope, her fingers numb. Her father's writing. A message from the past, delivered by a ghost who had apparently spent years watching over her from the shadows, honoring a promise. This man, Arthur Pendleton, hadn't been living, homeless out of destitution, alone. It had been a self-imposed exile, a shield, a way to watch her without drawing attention, waiting for the moment he could finally reveal the truth. Her last $3 hadn't just bought a stranger coffee. They had, in some unfathomable way, closed a circle, confirming the kindness her father always believed she possessed, perhaps triggering Arthur's decision that tonight was finally the night. The hidden truth wasn't just Arthur's identity, but the complete rewriting of her family's tragic history, the revelation of her father's desperate measures to protect her, and the enduring loyalty of a friend she'd been taught to despise. The rain hammered against the diner windows, but inside, the world had gone quiet, leaving only the weight of the unopened letter in Sarah's hand and the steady gaze of the man who held the key to her past. How much of our lives are shaped by stories others tell us, and what happens when a single act of kindness shatters lifelong assumptions? Drop your theory in the comments and subscribe for more stories where true identities hide in plain sight.